So, I was gonna make a video reacting to the entire Nintendo Direct, but then my audio got messed up because my microphone audio did not get picked up. So instead, I decided I would just do a quick abridged version of all my thoughts of everything that was revealed in the Direct that I wanted to talk about. Starting off with the first thing that was revealed, I, like many a young Nintendo fan, grew up playing Mario, but my particular facet of the franchise has probably always been the Mario and Luigi games. Mario and Luigi RPGs are just so unique compared to everything else in the franchise, and frankly, anything else in the RPG genre. They don't really play like your typical RPGs because if you're good enough, you never actually take any damage, and all in all, they just had so much more interactivity with the overworld and a whole bunch of other factors that I could go on and on about, but I won't. My first ever game in this franchise was Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story, and it's probably my favorite Mario game, period. I'm probably going to end up playing it at some point on the channel, don't really know when, but all that to say that the Mario and Luigi Brotherhood game that was announced, I'm super looking forward to it. Mario and Luigi games are always so uniquely fun and enjoyable, and it's crazy to me that we haven't gotten a single thing in this franchise for like 9 years. The game so far looks like it's going to be absolutely amazing. I love the unique aesthetic that the enemies have, which is pretty typical of Mario and Luigi games. Plus, I really like the flourishes they've added to things like Bros attacks, and it's always nice seeing the connection Mario and Luigi have with each other. I know a lot of people really like to meme on them and say, oh wow, Mario's a total sociopath, or that Luigi is dying for Mario to get out of the way so he can finally be player one. But getting a good opportunity to see the two bros actually be brothers and be friendly with each other is just something that I absolutely love. Moving on to the next big announcement, Fairy Tail 2. Now, Fairy Tail is my favorite anime of all time, and while I never completed the original game, I do own it. That's another thing I probably need to get around to playing for this channel at some point. We'll see how that goes. The point is, I'm excited for Fairy Tail 2. Admittedly, I will have to finish the first game before I go into it more, but Fairy Tail has always been my favorite show to just go back to as a good comfort anime, you know? So I'm pretty excited for the release. Whether or not it ends up being good, well, that remains to be seen. Moving right along, we have Dragon Quest III HD. I'm gonna be honest, I have never played a Dragon Quest game and I have no interest to. I really wanted to touch on it briefly just to say that I don't know if I necessarily like the art style they chose to go with here. I get that the original games were probably done in sprites, and having it be HD 2D with sprites on a 3D background does give it a little bit more of an identity, but I feel like at this point it's safe to say you probably could have just done 3D models completely. Donkey Kong Country is a game that I have some pretty fond memories of. I played the original game on my dad's Super Nintendo all the way back when I was a young child, and Donkey Kong Country Returns is another game that I enjoyed because my cousin owned it, so whenever I would go over to his house, he would usually let me play the game. I'm pretty sure I actually ended up completing the entire game this way, which means I'm kind of hesitant on the Donkey Kong Country Returns game. Look, don't get me wrong, I absolutely adored this game as a child, but I don't know if I'm willing to drop the likely $80 price tag for just an HD retexture, when the original game is probably still just as good, if not better. I think too that it's worth noting, adding the additional levels from the DS is a nice touch, but it's not really enough to say that I'm 100% looking forward to buying this game. One final note before I move on, I'm not sure how I feel about the addition of the third heart. I think it's a pretty good idea on paper, because the Donkey Kong Country games tended to be pretty difficult. Even as a child, I always found that I was dying a lot with these games, but I don't think that was necessarily due to lack of hearts, though it was the reason I died quite a bit. I think adding the third heart is a nice touch because it allows them to ease new players into the franchise, but I hope that for more experienced players or people who are buying the remaster and have already played the original game, that they allow the option to remove the third heart as well, just to make things a little bit more challenging for the people who have more experience. Moving into the last few sections, Super Mario Party is a game that I never really bought. I've only ever played Mario Party DS extensively because I never really had many people to play the game with. But I'm pretty excited for Mario Party Jamboree. I watch plenty of people who play Mario Party online, and it seems like a really fun game. Plus, I know firsthand that playing it with your friends can not only be incredibly fun, but incredibly salt-inducing at the same time, and frankly, that's what I live for when it comes to these sorts of games. I definitely think it's one that I'll probably pick up, and I think the fact that you can play with up to 20 people at the same time seems excessive and chaotic, but honestly, I feel like that's Mario Party down to its bones, so I'm looking forward to it all the same. Continuing on with the trend of Nintendo games, the Nintendo World Championships NES Edition is what I would believe to be a really solid introduction to people to the world of speedrunning. I am not a speedrunner, and I do not have the skill to be one, but I might end up taking it up at some point, assuming I actually manage to get to that point in my gaming career, because I think it's really interesting to see how much people can optimize these games. But being able to bring these to home console and give them an actual in-game way to time themselves, that's a nice touch. I think it's going to introduce a lot of people to the speedrunning community, and the fact that it's got an active board means that while yes, stuff like speedrun.com will still exist, you have a much more easy way of actually checking where you are compared to some other people across the world. Ace Attorney Investigations also revealed that it's going to be getting localized for the first time ever. I think it's a pretty nice touch, especially considering you can shift between sprites and more proper hand-drawn 2D style at will. I've heard that the investigation games are not really the best of the Ace Attorney franchise, but I mean, I watched Jello play them a while ago, and he seemed to have a pretty fun time amidst his screams about how poorly designed the games are, so maybe it'd be interesting to check out. Final three things that I'm going to talk about are things that probably everybody has talked about at some point. We're going to start with The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. I've played a few Zelda games in my time, and I'm happy to say that we finally get a good opportunity to play as the titular princess herself. I really loved her interpretations in Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild, so I think it's really cool to finally get to play as a character who for so long has really been taking the back seat. I know that this one's probably going to be a bit divisive, as there are going to inevitably be some people saying, "Oh, why is Zelda finally taking a stance? Why is Link no longer the protagonist?" And honestly, I can't be bothered to deal with that kind of criticism. In my opinion, it's just in bad faith, and I think it's a good idea to let the female characters that have run the series for so long actually get a good opportunity to shine. Mario and Link are not being replaced by Peach and Zelda. We're just getting a good opportunity to explore characters who have been incredibly underutilized. Now we just need Luigi to get a solo game of his own that's outside of the Mansion series, and everything can be complete. Oh right, that got announced too. The second to last thing to talk about is the Marvel vs. Capcom collection. I have always loved the Marvel vs. Capcom games for just being so flashy and over the top, and as fighting games, they're some of the most fun ones to play because you can be button mashing your mind out and also actually doing well at the same time. I'm not the best at fighting games, I'll be honest. But Marvel vs. Capcom makes it so that while I might not necessarily be the best, I can still have a blast stringing together a bunch of crazy combos. The only Marvel vs. Capcom game that I've actually sunk a bunch of time into is Marvel Infinite, which I know is sacrilege to most fighting game players, but in my opinion, it was a pretty fun game. That being said, I am absolutely 100% on board for exploring some of the older entries into the franchise, especially considering it'll get me a good opportunity to play characters like Wolverine or Cyclops who don't show up in the more modern installations. I really hope this sparks a new interest in the Marvel franchise, and that they decide to bring back the Marvel vs. Capcom games. I just ask that if you do, please bring back X. He is my favorite character in all of Capcom, and if he is not going to be there, then I am going to be very sad. The final big thing to talk about for the Direct is Metroid Prime 4. It's nice that we're finally getting to see more news on Metroid Prime 4, because it was announced all the way back in 2017, making it older than games like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which came out in 2018. I thought this game was cancelled, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. So I'm so glad that Metroid fans are finally getting this game that they have waited upwards of 7 years for at this point, and it doesn't even get released this year. I've played a total of 3 Metroid games in my time, that being Fusion, Super, and Zero Mission, so while I don't have an overly huge connection to the franchise, I have heard that the Prime games are arguably the best parts of it, so I'd definitely be interested in checking this one out. I just need to hope I can find the time to play 3 whole games within the next year. But knowing Metroid, I'm sure that won't be a huge problem, because there'll probably be some sort of delay that puts it back even further. Now all we need is a new Kid Icarus game, and I can finally be a happy Nintendo fan. And that's my overall thoughts of the Direct. So what did I think overall? Well, I'll be honest, I think this is one of the most solid Directs we've had in literal years. A lot of Nintendo Directs tend to fall into the problem of really only having 1 or 2 big things to talk about, but this Direct really didn't feel like it. Yeah, I'll admit, I'm a little bit upset that there's so many re-releases or remasters, but that's just kind of the state of gaming nowadays, rather than something that you could specifically pin on Nintendo. The Direct is also making active efforts to include a lot more characters and franchises that we haven't seen in the limelight for an incredibly long period of time. Getting to play as Zelda or getting to see a new Metroid game after all this time is just a fantastic step in the right direction in my mind, and I'm absolutely looking forward to whatever Nintendo decides to do with these characters going forward. I will admit, I do wish we got a little bit more information on the Switch 2, simply because I don't know how many of these games are going to be outdated by the time that we can actually get our hands on them, because if the Switch 2 comes out at some time next year, I really just want to know if it's backwards compatible. Otherwise, I feel like you'd be spending a lot of money on Switch games that ultimately you can't really play on the newer console just a couple months later. I'm sure that they probably will, considering other times Nintendo has done a enhanced version of their previous console, they tend to have some sort of backwards compatibility, but you never really know, and with the modern state of gaming, it's hard to say exactly, because this hobby can be a little bit of a money sink. But that's what I thought about it, so what did you guys think about it? I'm really interested to know what other people have to say about these games, and what they're looking forward to. Sound off in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. I really want to keep making these videos, and I've got a few things in the works, so I hope you'll check them out.